We're here at Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi for the AI Summit that is currently ongoing. And with me is Dr. Florian Mueller. He is the head of AI at Bain and Company for the EMEA region. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
AI adoption is catching up and it's become so mainstream across industries, particularly at a firm like yours. What is the kind of adoption and the speed of change that you're looking at when it comes to artificial intelligence integration?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of advances in AI, but the point that you're making about adoption is right, but we're not yet seeing it at scale. And I think that's the evolution and the trend that we're seeing now. How do we move from first pilots, first prototypes that all of the organizations are trying out to really adoption at scale? Because if we look at the work that we're doing with our clients, but also at our studies, only 20% of organizations really know how to scale it. And the challenge there is not so much about getting the best model and building the best algorithms, but it's actually getting the full stack in place on what is required to really transform a business model and how things are being done from an end-to-end perspective, because that requires technology, but that also requires a lot of process re-engineering, change management, taking the organization along so that you really get the benefits out of it.
Well, you represent the EMEA region, so particularly for the African continent and for the Middle East, there's a lot of conversation about democratization and inclusivity when it comes to artificial intelligence. And the main concern about representatives from these countries is cultural integration, because we end up looking at such a Western perspective to so many things. The fact that a lot of Global South does not get to see itself integrated culturally and in the manner that they want to, how is it that this is a problem that can be solved in the future when it comes to adopting AI and democratizing the entire process?
It's a great point, and obviously in a lot of the discussions we're having around the Global South, that is one of the key discussions. And one element, and you pointed this one out, is the data on which the models are being trained, on how inclusive is it, what kind of a bias are we introducing into the models just by the nature and how they're being trained. But that's only just one element of it. I think the maybe even more important element is access to the technology, being able to use it, being able to deploy it at scale, and doing all of that in a fashion that allows those countries to be sovereign and resilient. And sovereign not in the sense of being fully self-sufficient and trying to do everything on their own, but being to establish a global network of partnerships that allows them to really get the benefits and bring them to life. And yes, we also need to address the aspect of fairness in the models and inclusivity, and I think there's a lot of discussion around using data for fine-tuning and so on in those respective countries, but I think it's the broader set of topics that is important to really make it inclusive.
There's also conversation about infrastructure development when it comes to artificial intelligence. The West is definitely way ahead. But when it comes to the Global South, what are the big challenges that you're looking to address when it comes to the critical, fundamental, foundational infrastructure for AI?
Yeah, and I understand that a lot of focus is on that topic because the large share of the investments have been going into infrastructure. So for a lot of economies and in the public debate, a lot of discussion is around infrastructure. But to be fair, it's only a very small part of the AI value chain and the way on how to get benefits out of it. And no country is self-sufficient. Even if you look at the giants, the US and China, none of them is fully self-sufficient if you look at the entire value chain of how things are being produced. So my advice is not to only focus on the infrastructure component, but really at an end-to-end ecosystem. And we're seeing that those economies that are the most successful, they know how to get the right elements of the AI value chain in place, while at the same time building a whole ecosystem, which includes having a clear national strategy, having the right talent in place, and driving adoption. That will bring them the biggest benefits. It's not having all of the data centers in my own country, but being smart about what data and compute capacity do I need in country, where do I team and partner with global providers of those solutions, and then those economies will get the biggest impact.
Where do you see India as a player on the global stage in this AI race?
India doing it incredibly well, and we just looked at different economies and different pathways that countries are taking, and we saw India as an adoption accelerator. So a country that has set a pace very early on in building out a lot of the foundations that are needed, both in terms of talent, but also some of the guardrails and the digital rails that are needed to drive adoption, and then very much focusing on aspects like data and driving adoption across industry, which is a great pathway to take. I think there are further steps that could be done to get to a more holistic ecosystem, which, for example, includes the compute capacity, because if you look at how that is being distributed around the world, only 6%, I think, is the number is in India right now. And well, just listening around these days, I think there's a lot of effort underway to further strengthen this. But overall, I think India is on a great pathway, and we're seeing great, amazing first results.
Well, I have to end with the elephant in the room, and that's about jobs. And I think for the layman, the biggest concern is AI going to wholly, solely replace jobs, or will it still require human intervention at some level?
It's a fair question and an obvious one. And we had those same discussions in the past when we talked about electricity, when we talked about machines, when we talked about the internet and the digital revolution. There was always the fear, what does this mean for my job? I'm not worried about mass unemployment, because if you look at all of those historic trends and also the most recent studies, there is the clear prediction that there's going to be a net increase in jobs. What worries me more is that there is a shift in tasks and roles that is happening, and that organizations and companies are not quickly adapting. So I strongly believe we're going to see more jobs going forward, but the nature of the jobs is going to change. But it's not AI that is going to replace humans, it's humans that use AI that are going to replace other humans. So it's more important to drive their adoption than being worried about any negative downsides that we can manage responsibly.
So clearly a lot of adaptation in adoption for AI is what the fundamental over here is. Thank you so much for talking to us here on WION, sir. Thank you.